What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today, as promised, I'm going to be disassembling the Manix 2, hopefully in a way that is helpful for people. I've done this a couple of times now. It's extremely frustrating. The Manix 2 is a very popular knife, but it is probably one of the most difficult knives to disassemble and put back together that's out there, and it creates a lot of frustration for people. So I'm gonna try and help you guys through that. I feel like there's gonna be a lot of people doing this right now because Flytanium just released some titanium, brass, and copper cage locks for the Manix 2, and I know you guys are gonna want to get your hands on those and get your knives disassembled and reassembled so you can start enjoying that. For anybody else wanting to install custom scales, I'm also going to be doing that today. So hopefully this is helpful for a whole bunch of people. I know you guys want to see my original disassembly when I put the cage in. It's not enjoyable to watch. It's like watching somebody roll around in tacks. It's really, really not fun to watch. So unfortunately for you guys, that video is never going to see the light of day. So I'm going to go over a couple of things I think you guys should have before you get started. Number one, once you guys get in there, you're probably going to want to clean it, so make sure you've got your lubricant of choice. I would also recommend having some of these guys that'll help you control how much lubricant you actually put on the pivot and the washers, things like that. Maybe also some paper towels to help you clean up gunk. I'm not going to be doing that today. It's just something I'm going to recommend. Obviously, you're going to want to have a driver kit. I would recommend having 2 different drivers just because there's one situation where you're holding things in and being able to quickly switch to another driver that's already got the right bit in there is really convenient. I can't tell you how many times I was doing this and I had to reach down and switch the bits out in the driver and the spring exploded and it launched the ball bearing across the room. It's really frustrating. If you have 2 different drivers, have 2 of them out. The bits that you're going to want to have ready are a T8, that's for the handle screws, and then the T10 for the pivot screw. I would recommend having your second driver equipped with another T10. That'll make things really easy for you. You also want to have something that you can keep your loose screws in, because if you lose those and they fall on the floor, you're going to put your face through the wall. It's really, really frustrating to lose a screw or a ball bearing or something in the carpet or whatever. For those of you switching out your cage, you'll just have to imagine that your plastic one or my plastic one is still installed, because we're going to get all the way in there so that you guys can see what's going on. Give you a quick look here of how this looks when it's installed. It works flawlessly. I love this thing. Highly recommend it. You can see that I've already taken my body screws out, and that's just for time saving. Ironically, we're at 3 minutes in the video already, so let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and put my T10 in there, and I'm also going to move a lot of this stuff off the table just so we can focus on the knife here. If you have a large area, a large workspace, then that's obviously recommended, because you've got more room for those flying parts to not go off your table. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, well, I guess I'll use this one. Go ahead and take the rear side, and I mean the side with the pocket clip. Go ahead and loosen up that pivot side. If you don't do that, that's going to cause an issue later once you get in there. So go ahead and take that out, and then go ahead and take your front pivot out, and of course your scale screws, which mine are already out of there. And then go ahead and take your front scale off. Now, if you want to keep from your blade scratching up, go ahead and pull the blade out. I don't really care. This is a user, so I'm not going to do that. Mine's going to come off. I say this and then watch it not come off easily. Mine's going to come off pretty easily because I've done this a couple of times. Yours may not. You just kind of have to rock it back and forth and do that. For those of you who are wondering, my copper scales are already spoken for, already paid for. They're going to be shipping out, so those are not available. So once you're in here, and this is the part where it's going to start getting frustrating. For those of you who are not installing custom scales, the only thing you need to do is take this screw out, which I'll do here real quick just to demonstrate. I'm going to get my tool. Use my teeth off camera to pull that bit out of there because the magnet's too strong. So all you're going to need to do is loosen this screw right here. Or actually, not loosen. You're going to need to actually pull it out. So those of you who are installing just the cage and you're going to leave your scales on, you actually don't need to take that back scale off. And here's why. Because if you leave this screw in, it'll allow this to move. And you might have to loosen this screw up so that it does that. But it allows this to lean out just a little bit. And what that does, and you can see there, it allows you to pull this out and get the blade off. There goes the spring and the cage, okay? Now, when you're putting that cage back in there, which we'll talk about, having this screw stay right there keeps this whole piece in place. And you're going to want that. You don't want that sliding all over the place. You want that screw to stay there. So that's just something, to keep in mind. Also, for people who are wanting to clean their stuff, there's your opportunity to do that, obviously. All this is going to fly all over the place. I'm trying to keep the centerpiece and the washers and everything in there because I'm not needing to clean it, or at least I'm not really ultra concerned with that. Now, for anybody else who's going to be installing custom scales like me, obviously you're going to need to take off the scale here. So you're going to pull that piece out. You're going to pull the screw out. Then you're also going to have to remove the pocket clip. Now, I've got a custom MSG, or is it MXG deep carry clip on here. You guys, some of you might have just the standard Spyderco clip. If so, then, just use the correct head. It actually should also still just be a T8. This is probably something I could have done, off camera to save everybody some time. The reason this last one's being done off camera is because it's actually at an angle. Getting in there to the peak of that can be a little bit tricky. Just going to go ahead and pull that off there and save that reinstallation for later, because that's not necessarily something everybody needs to watch. So once you're back to this side, it's the same thing. Just pull the scale off there and you're set. Now, obviously, reinstalling the other scales, go ahead and put this side back on. These are brand new scales, so I'm likely going to have to work that barrel in there just a little bit. And this is going to be the first cut in the video because I'm going to have to work that in. And if I make you guys sit here and watch me do it, it's going to take a whole bunch of time. But essentially what I'm doing is rocking back and forth on the scale so that this tube goes all the way through. So we'll be back here in just a sec. Okay, guys, we are back. And for anybody wondering how I got the tube to go through the G10 side, because that can be a little bit tricky, what you're going to want is something, you don't want to take a hammer directly to the outside of that tube. What you want to do is take something that you can put on the outside of it. Obviously, line up the liner and the scale. Put something over there to protect. In this case, this is just the outside of a calculator. Something to protect the tube, and then just lightly tap on it. It should tap through. You're going to get a little bit of shrapnel from the G10. It'll tap through just fine, and you'll be okay. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you should have this piece. That's the inside there. You can see there, one side is D-shaped. There's only one side that's D-shaped. So have your washer, hold on to your washer. Put the side that's not D-shaped through that, and put that side down into the screw. So you're going to want it to look like this, with the D side up. And ideally, it's going to be somewhere like right here with the D. You want the D side kind of pointing towards that deal right there, and I'll explain that here in a second. The next thing you're going to want to do is take this piece, and you're going to want to line up the bottom of it here. Actually, before you do that, screw this in so that it doesn't fly all over the place. Go ahead and take your pivot and whatever, ideally this is when you have your spare driver that's already equipped with the right size Torx head, and just screw that in there. And hopefully that will stay in the right place. And then keep that thing handy just in case you need it again, because this next part is usually where all the parts fly all over the place, and that's not fun. So go ahead and line up this screw, push it all the way through. Pushing it all the way through is generally the easiest way to go, and sometimes it doesn't do that. But if you can push it through and then line up the bottom of this, it goes this way with that, and then go ahead and use your driver to screw that in there. And you're going to want to get that down fairly snug, because this is what's going to control the spring. It still needs to pivot, but not a lot, just a little bit. You can see mine is all scratched up. I don't care. You guys might. If you're really concerned with whether or not the inside of this is scratched up, you're going to be in for one heck of a time. But this is a user, so I don't care. Okay, let's see if I can get this done in one try this time. It usually takes more than one try. So this is the part where the bowl needs to be in the right place. You can see there when looking at this, we'll take the spring off. One side of that bowl, which is back, it's this side, is higher than the other side. That's the side that you need to have in the back so that the ball bearing sits in there like this. So just like this, you can see the position of this. You're going to take it and turn it, and it goes in this way. So we're going to try that. Now we're going to be doing a whole bunch of things at once. We're going to be putting this in, putting the spring up against this down here, and we're going to be pushing down on it. Then we're going to be taking the blade and setting the blade on the pivot, and then you're going to use this piece to control everything. And once you have it snapped into place, you can take another one of these little screws and screw it into the back side there. So have your smaller bit ready, because that's what you're going to do. You are going to need multiple hands. A lot of times this is the part where it just takes multiple tries. Getting everything to sort of stay together is really a gigantic pain at this point. So just have faith that it'll eventually work. You may not get it first try. We're going to hopefully get it first try on camera. In fact, to make sure that I get it first try on camera, I'm going to cut the video right here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start here. Make sure you've got it set up just like this. What you're going to do is set the whole cage, and you got to remember you're going to have to hold it in because that ball bearing is going to want to fly out of there. Push it down. Keep this, don't pull it too far back because you're not going to be able to push the cage all the way down, and keep it in a position that will allow the blade to come in. So it should be something like this. And then if you're lucky, you're going to be able to set the blade on there and push this over all at the same time, allowing the blade to rotate around, ride on that ball bearing. Keep your thumb pushed down over this part right here, because when it clicks into that spot right there where it locks out, it's going to want to fly out of place. Get it in there, watch your fingers, hold everything down. Now, push that forward, feel that click. Now we're lined up on that hole. And now, this other driver you've got ready is going to go to work. So, you're going to line that screw up back there. I'm fearing turning this upside down so that nothing comes flying into place. It should be fairly well held in place, but it might not be. So just keep your fingers all in the right spot. Now, you got to get this lined up correctly or that screw's not going to go in there. But if you get it lined up and all the planets are aligned and the gods are in your favor, you're going to be able to screw that side down. So now once you've got that, you're pretty much past the difficult part. Now, this is the part where that D-shaped pivot can create problems, because you got to get this lined up. You have to get the liner lined up. But if the other side of your pivot isn't cranked down all the way, you should be able to make little tiny adjustments. So we're going to take that out just a little bit, and this should allow me to make little adjustments. Now, it might not. You still have to be careful with the cage, but you should be able to ever so slightly turn, and you might be able to set that. Well, it's not. Yeah, you're not going to be able to set that on there. So, I mean, what you're going to have to do is turn it a little bit at a time with your fingernails. And it might allow you to do that, and it might not. This is going to be one of the more difficult moments here. The other thing that you can do is you can pull the cage back, and you can attempt to rotate the blade a little bit and get that to turn. I don't know that this is going to allow me to do this, but essentially you're going to keep working that until it slides into place. You can see there mine needs to rotate ever so slightly that way. This is why it's so important to get the pivot lined up correctly with that screw, or with that last screw hole on the other side. Still needs to go a little bit more. This can be difficult and time consuming, but if you're at this part with me, then you're past the worst of it. It can just be a little bit difficult there. I think we have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the worst part of it. So if you can follow me to that point, that's going to be where, you know, that's just going to be the worst of it there. So now, excuse me, if you're at this point and you need to get that front scale on, let me see if I can demonstrate here how I do this. You need to get the scale lined up just right. Make sure it's lined up. I just realized it's going to shake the entire camera. So, but that's what I'm doing there. So let me cut the video and I'll be back after it's on there. Okay, we've got it all hammered together now. If you're afraid of, you know, giving a light tap with a hammer to your knife, you know, then I don't know. It's going to be difficult not to do something like that, because if you're changing out scales, you're going to have to kind of tap that back in there. And if you're taking off the stock scales, you know, you're going to have to kind of wiggle it around. That tube is kind of pressed into everything. But basically from here, all you're doing is just reassembling the knife. So we'll go ahead and put the front scale back in. I start with the pivot, but depending on how your scales are lining up, you might have to start with the scale screws, because the scale might not want to line up perfectly with the liner. That happens sometimes with custom scales. It doesn't mean anything's off. Like for example, with my Flytanium scales, I actually had to start with a different scale screw to get it to tighten down. And I just had to keep, whoops, that's a pocket clip screw. I had to keep messing with that until it did what I wanted it to do. So sometimes you might have to start with this one. Sometimes you might have to start with a different one. Sometimes you have to start with the pivot. You know, it just kind of depends. But now we are at a point where the knife is locking and unlocking, and I'll probably have to tighten some things down. You can see there it's not quite perfectly centered. I haven't tightened anything down yet, but I'll make those adjustments on my own. But essentially now the knife is the way that I want it, and we've gotten it all together. So hopefully this helped some of you, or helped some of you kind of understand it may not be the best way to do this, but this is how I do it. This is how I avoid a lot of the frustrations that are associated with doing something like this. If you're able to take this knife apart and put it back together, and you know, get these titanium cages installed, or your custom scales or whatever, you're going to be able to enjoy a knife that is already really, really good even more. So, you know, it's one of those things where you don't have to do it. The Manix 2 is fine the way that it is, but you know, if you're brave and you want to give it a shot, it's really going to make you love the Manix 2 when you get it exactly the way you want it. So I hope this was somewhat helpful to people trying to do this. You know, if it was, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check that stuff out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.